Greetings, fellow film photographers. This is Rick Paul, your resident Nikon guy. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Nikon F4, the next camera in my continuing review of the Nikon professional camera bodies. The Nikon F4 was debuted in 1988. It had been a long time coming. People were really anxious to get it. The F3 had been around for a long time already, and people were really excited by the F4. It immediately gained excellent reviews and almost immediately became the camera of choice for professionals around the world. It remained in production even 10 years after its introduction. It was still a frontline camera of action. Before we look at what makes the F4 unique, let's look at a little bit of its history and where it came from. If you go back to before the F4, we had the F3. The F3 had some limitations they wanted to address in the F4. Biggest one was the F3 was limited to a 1/80th of a second flash sync speed, and that was just too slow for a lot of professional photographers. It also had center-weighted metering system, which did require some experience in judging the exposure. Thus, there grew a considerable demand for Nikon to develop a new camera with a convenient, reliable matrix metering system, based on the F3. So in 1983, Nikon actually introduced the Nikon FA. This is a smaller, serious amateur body, but the Nikon FA was the first Nikon camera to have a matrix metering system. So that was one of the first stepping stones towards the F4. So they really came up with three design goals for a new F3: a higher shutter sync speed, a better metering system, and autofocus. So the F4 is really the first Nikon SLR that resembles what we think of today as a professional SLR. It has the vertical battery grip, which is an option, but most people got it that way. That's called an F4S with the vertical battery grip. The nice thing about the F4 is if you want a smaller body, you can take the battery grip off, put a different battery compartment in the bottom, and have a smaller body. So the bare F4 uses 4 AA batteries in an MB20 battery pack, where the F4S has the MB21 vertical grip and uses 6 AA batteries and can achieve 5.7 frames per second. It also gives you that nice vertical shutter release, and that's a feature that we take for granted today, but back in 1988 had been a feature that photographers had long been asking for. What are the other innovations in the F4? Well, I think one of the greatest ones is the shutter. It really has an incredible shutter. It has a shutter balancer that absorbs a small amount of the camera shake that occurs when you press the shutter release button. It's made of tungsten alloy and has a very large specific gravity to absorb that shutter motion. 2 of the F4's 8 shutter blades have epoxy plates made of carbon fiber to reduce the weight and again keep the shake to a minimum. It also has a dual curtain to provide a better light shield. The front and rear curtains minimize light leakage when shooting during mirror lockup or very bright conditions. The accuracy of the Nikon matrix metering system works for even vertical format photography. That was also an innovation. So when you turn the camera vertical, the matrix metering adjusts and still gives you accurate exposures, just as it did in the horizontal. One of the big things you'd notice about an F4 is it's quiet. It's very quiet. In fact, when it came out, it was so quiet, fashion models had been used to being shot with the F3, and they could tell when the photographer took a picture because the F3 is quite loud. The models knew, when to change poses based on the shutter click. They knew every click they could move a little bit. The models started complaining about the F4 because it was too quiet. They couldn't tell when the photographer was taking a picture. The F4 is also the first camera that introduced the continuous silent mode. So it tries to shoot a little bit slower, a little bit quieter, and delays the mirror coming back down to make things quieter. It's also slow and rewinding, so it does it very, very quietly. Some of the base specs of the F4: it has a maximum shutter speed of 1/8,000th of a second, which again is pretty common nowadays on standard cameras. Has an ISO range from 6 to 6400. It's got all the automatic modes you would think of, plus an extra one. But it does have aperture priority, shutter priority, program auto, and it has one called program high. Program high, it will try to maintain a high shutter speed as best it can. Continuous shooting, it's got continuous high, continuous low, and the continuous silent mode. It has a nice exposure bias dial right up on top. It does have a standard dial for your shutter speed. No LCDs on this camera. You know, one of the nice things that I really like about the F4 is I really don't think you'll ever hold a sexier camera. It just is a very comfortable camera to hold. It's just got very clean lines. It's just a very, very fun camera to shoot with. Some of the other features, it does still have a removable prism, so you can change the prism out. You can change the focusing screens out. So all that is still, you know, standard with your Nikon professional bodies. So what can you get a Nikon F4S for? Well, I got mine. I have a very pristine one. Mine is practically in mint condition. I was shocked how clean this camera was when I got it from KEH. Either from KEH or on eBay, you should be able to find a nice F4, F4S in very good condition for generally under $300. If you're spending closer to $400, it should really be in absolute mint condition. It's a really fun camera to shoot with. Recommend you go out and check out an F4S if you're looking for a really professional, rugged Nikon film body. So that's all for today. 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 So that's all for today.